can get started, and I'm sure folks will trickle in.
Pardon me.
Oh, you're fine. I'm a wanderer. I walk around a lot, so let's just see. Is everything? Yes, we can hear that. Well, I'm happy to introduce both. We have Dr. Gary Keller and Dr. Linda Jaroffke with their presentation, Secrets to Energizing / Sustaining Your Academic Presentation and or Publishing Goals for Tenure, as well as for promotion. So something that we could all use a little bit more insight into thinking about. Dr. Gary Keller is a professor of business, a professor in the College of Business, and has more than 29 published articles in peer-reviewed publications, 28 juried conference presentations, including 4 Best Research Paper Awards from international conferences. He has a Ph.D. in business from North Central University, an MS in management from Cardinal Stritch University, an MA in modern European history from the University of Wisconsin, and a BA in history from the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. Keller joined our EOU faculty in September 2012, and in May 2013, he was promoted to full professor. Is that right? I pulled it off. Wow. Excellent. Dr. Linda Jaroffke, professor of anthropology, has more than 90 publications and professional reports. In addition, she has presented at over 30 international, national, and regional conferences. She has a PhD and an MA in anthropology from the University of Oregon, and an MA in historical archaeology from the University of Leicester in England, and a bachelor's in anthropology from Appalachian State. She joined our faculty at EOU in 2000, and in June 2011, she was promoted to full professor. At this time, I'll turn it over, and I think we're starting off with Dr. Keller.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that very kind introduction. And I welcome everyone in the audience as well as people online. In particular, I don't know if the new Dean of the College of Business is online. He was mentioning that he might be, but if he is, Dean Henninger, welcome to EOU and the College of Business, and I'll get started. First of all, first secret, I've got 3 secrets for you. First secret, for those who are still working on their PhD, one of our faculty members who is probably listening to it online, Catherine Yamamoto, is working on her PhD right now. She's cleared to go through chapter 4. Secret number 1, if you're hired, let's say at EOU, an EOU level institution, and you still have time to complete your PhD, don't wait until you get your PhD. Secret 1, you don't have to wait until you get the PhD to publish. That's a fallacy. You can present your preliminary research, and I'm going to show you what I did, or research in progress at a variety of scholarly venues. By the way, I have highlighted certain things in red here for you, and I'll explain as I go. Here's the example. I was working on my PhD, and I was about through chapter 4. I had run some preliminary tests. That was the inspiration for the first paper, and you can see it highlighted, a preliminary investigation. The other part that I wanted to highlight, and I know Linda will be referring to this a little bit later as well, paper was selected, this is important when you put it in your CV, by a double-blind process. It's showing quality of the presentation venue that you're at, and it was also selected for a publication that they have. And you'll see the value of how you can add 5 quality items to your CV by going to one conference. And then the publication that came out, you can see review of the business research, peer-reviewed, publicly available, and I won't drill into all of the details of Cabell's directory and so on and so forth, but it's showing quality. That's the key thing. All of the red highlight is simply to show as you get more publications or presentations, you're showing quality to people that are on tenure review committees and so on and so forth. They may not know your topic or your subject area very well, but if you keep showing peer-reviewed, Cabell's, Ulrich's, ProQuest, so on and so forth, you're showing that you're paying attention to it. And by the way, there's about 8 publications in here that are all derivatives of the original thesis and the original dissertation that I had. I repeated it, meaning I took the same subject matter, but I applied it in different areas, and I got different research off of it. So one dissertation can spawn additional topics and publications. 4 presentations at international conferences. By the way, never ever let the fact that EOU or any budget may not have sufficient funds to provide you with the opportunity to present at an international conference. It's showing quality, it's showing the reach. Online presentations for scholarly conferences are now quite popular. They're ubiquitous. So you don't literally have to go to, I did go to Madrid, Spain. I didn't go to Osaka, Japan, but some of these others you can attend by way of a virtual presentation. It all depends on the conference, but as long as you're showing a rigorous double-blind review and so forth, sometimes things happen that you don't expect. A best paper award. Here's 5 goals when you're selecting a conference. Attend a credible conference. And I think most dissertation review, most tenure and promotion committees are looking for that type of reach. Are you simply staying local, or are you pushing beyond? Because it's also good for a university and its reputation. So select a credible conference. You may be able to attend one conference, but make it credible. You can present a paper, you can be part of a panel discussion or poster. Try to see if they have a conference publication associated with it, because that is yet another venue for publication. And volunteer to be these things. When I go to a conference, I'll volunteer to be a discussant. So I not only attended, anyone can do that, but then I became a discussant, a session leader, or even more importantly, to become a reviewer. Once you become a reviewer, others want you to participate because your name gets known, and it's another opportunity because then you get to see what others are doing and what others are looking for in acceptance of your paper and your research. And so that gives you an insight that most don't have. You're playing the guessing game on the outside. And of course, getting into a conference journal that I just mentioned. So there's 5 things you can do at one conference. Which one should I go to? The optimal conference, double-blind, peer-reviewed, as opposed to we'll take any paper that comes in. And there's so much competition, you'll see in a couple slides from now, for papers and conferences that you need to be careful about it. Make sure that the conference has a proceedings with an ISN, ISBN type of number as well. It's credibility, it's quality. I have 2 websites up there for you, and all you have to do is click on that and take a look. All over the world, there are conferences in your subject areas that will come up, and that's one way of checking to find out what's available, where, when, and it gives you a good lead time as well. I just mentioned volunteer to be those, how can I put it, members of the conference itself, but if you can also become a member of an organizing committee, and some of the conferences that I've attended saw my activity, and the next year they asked me, would you be part of the organizing committee? Yet another value, 6 things that can come out of a conference. And many colleagues over the years have always said, I'm afraid to present, because the fear is I'll be found wrong when I present. Fear not. You're going there to present your research to the best of your ability. There's always going to be the wise guy or gal in the audience that's going to try to trick you. Maybe, maybe not. I haven't run into that in the conferences that I've been at. Linda may want to comment on her experience. But even if someone asks you questions that are difficult to answer, you don't know everything. Don't let that stop you. And for those that are just beginning, or want to move up in their academic career, start now. Start as early as you can on building up a portfolio so that you're not in the position that I've seen colleagues in where they're in their, the fourth year and they need a conference bad. Where can I get one, Gary? Come on, where can I get one? And you're rushing, and it's no fun. The other thing is if you show this progressive track of making presentations, publications, you don't have to worry about hitting the minimums wherever you are. Just show consistent record of productivity, and I'll get into why that's not easy. And seeking publication venues for your dissertation or your research, where do you do that as well? Keep in mind, EOU is not a Tier 1 research institution. Those are always going to be very demanding. Some subject areas, some disciplines want certain conferences, want certain publications, and that's it. Well, the important thing, let's say at an EOU level institution, is we're primarily a teaching institution, but we're still encouraging research. And remember, EOU may not be your first and final stop. And so you want to be in the game for the long run. You always want to be prepared. So the best fit publication, there's a variety of them. Peer-reviewed is the way to go because you don't have just one person looking at it, or as I'm going to show, predatory publications. These are some other ideas for you. The journals affiliated with conferences, I've used that track quite a bit. Oddly enough, the first submission I ever made went to a publication. I wasn't sure if it was the real deal or not. The Thunderbird School of Management. And quite frankly, I kept thinking of Thunderbird wine when I was a kid growing up. And I thought, oh well, let it go. Sent it in, and it took a while. They were going back and forth with me, and I thought, what's the big deal here? What's the big deal? Turns out it's a Tier 1 type publication. And the only reason they didn't accept it was there were 3 people looking at it. One did not like it, the other 2 did. And the editor said, well, I've got to go with the person that didn't like it. I thought, okay. And that one went on to win a Best Conference Award paper. So 1 door closes, 3 more open. And open access journals. By the way, here's some ways to find out the quality of the publications. Check these sources, and our library professionals will be helpful in it. You notice on the right-hand side, acceptance rates. I'll show you why that's important for you as well. And libraries are probably the best way to get into Ulrichs and Cabell's as well. You notice what I have here is highlighted is the acceptance rate was 25%. The acceptance rate was 12%. Acceptance rate 10 to 20%. What you're doing is showing every time you get a publication, how difficult was it to get into that journal? How carefully did they screen their publications? Now again, every discipline, every university has got different criteria, but if you're getting acceptance rates from publications in that number, sooner or later you can roll up the average of all of those acceptance rates in your CV and in your summary to the rank and tenure committee to say, on average, I've had 15 publications with an acceptance rate that averages, you name it, 7-8%. Most people don't do it. Do this. Open access journals, I've got a link to them. A colleague from Australia told me many people look down upon open access journals because they haven't been in business for 100 years, 150 years, whatever. She said the value of open access journals is they turn things a lot faster, so your research is getting out there quicker, faster, and you're gaining credibility as a scholar, young scholar. This is very difficult to see, but Kyle was very helpful in motivating me to look at this. This is called SSRN. I believe it stands for Social Science Research Network. You upload your papers in there, and it's another venue to get published. And here's the key to closing the loop on impact. You share your information. How do you know if it's been looked at, if it's valued? If you go to Google Scholar, I look at some of my things and I think, well, there's not a whole lot of people looking at it. Up in the corner here, take my word for it, 100, I'll take one publication, 176 views, 37 downloads. That means that people are looking at it and they're going to use it at some point. Google Scholar sooner or later will show you how many times you've been quoted and so forth. But once again, this is a motivating factor for yourself to see that the research that you think sometimes is so insignificant is making an impact. Others are looking at it. That's a good thing. And beware of pay-to-play publications. I won't open up Red Frame, but everything looks great until you get to the part of, and if this paper is accepted, the fee will be, it can range $300, $500, $1,000. So beware of that. And the way that you can check for predatory publications are through these web links, pardon me. Cabell's is up there and so forth. And they will tell you, beware of this publication, especially when you get, and we will turn around in 3 to 5 days if your paper is accepted or not. You know, I guess if you're up against the wall for a publication, you might get pulled into that. So what we're going to outline here is not easy. Some are going to say, we're a teaching institution. I don't believe that for a minute. Don't believe it because as teachers, you're also scholars. Others are going to say they don't have time for research. But as you can see, they do have time for movies, you know, all of the other stuff that's there. That kind of just vanishes. They'll forget the many games and shows and so forth. But you'll never forget. It's like we tell our students, you're never going to forget when you hear, will the master's candidates please stand up? Or when the Ph.D. has just been approved, welcome to the room, Dr. You'll never forget that. So you'll never forget the thrill of presenting at a conference, seeing your publication out there, getting a Best Paper Award, or congratulations. A colleague of mine yesterday showed me the letter. You were promoted and you have tenure because you need to overcome this. Fear is fantasy expressed as reality. Get over that and you're going to have fun doing publications, scholarly presentations, and winning best papers and getting promoted as well. And now I turn the floor over to the talented and dynamic Dr. Jaroffke.
Thank you very much.
You're
I'm not going to repeat some of the things that Gary talked about, but instead talk about the opportunities that you can have in our region, if not our valley, to do research. I found that it's been incredibly valuable to do so and to reach out. And so I'm focusing on some major research projects that I've done over the years that have led to national, international conference presentations, some local ones, but also book chapters, peer-reviewed articles, and otherwise. In my early years here, I started working on hunger, along with my colleague, Bill Grigsby. We formed the Haven from Hunger, and it's primarily fueled from our students in our classes, but I've been fortunate over the years to be involved in a number of grant proposals that were funded to do research, including from the National Institute of Health and the Northwest Health Foundation, and to do research on hunger. Part of that research was in cooperation with Oregon Health Sciences University, as well as our local and county and city officials. And so what happened is it started really from my volunteering at some of the local food banks. about 18 years ago, when I found that the research on hunger was really expanding. We knew that people were in dire straits throughout the United States. Oregon was the hungriest state in the United States, and in fact, Union County, Oregon was the hungriest county. We knew we had problems. And so what I found is, oh, sorry, Gib. He told me not to do that. Put my hand in my pocket. Is that what happened was that I had students who could go out and help do research. And what turned out to be is over many classes, over those 5 years, went out and assisted with the research. They got cited in the publications. They could put it on their resumes as undergraduate students. And it's something that I learned when I was at Appalachian State, is that my first best in paper at a conference was as an undergraduate student that I submitted at a conference, and I was scared beyond belief when I did so. But what happened is that it led to also students going to national conferences with me and co-presenting at the American Anthropological Association meetings, as well as going to some of the international ones. And what happened with that kind of research actually expanded out. We included local high school students who assisted in the research. We had sort of a battalion of college and high school students that went out and did observations. We taught them how to do it. We had college students that were brought in and hired to help code the data and help do interpretation. And what happened is it also led to many meetings in our local community to figure out solutions for the people that live here. And ultimately, for this kind of research, it comes down to helping people. And it ended up with a lot of press, probably going to 6 or 7 different national conferences, as well as some regional ones. And the students that were involved in that research, many of them have ended up going on to masters and PhDs based on that early undergraduate research. And I think that's, for a teaching college, that's one of the most valuable lessons that we can do and to demonstrate for our students. The next project I wanted to, well, really not a project, but a relationship, is that I've had a long-term relationship with the Wallowa-Whitman National Forest. This comes actually from before I came to teach at Eastern Oregon University. I worked for the Burns-Paiute tribe and had a research relationship with the Malheur National Forest, as well as the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service at the Malheur Refuge, where we were doing joint research and going to national conferences and jointly presenting. And so when I got here, it was a natural progression to reach out to them as an anthropologist and archaeologist about doing research, and where it could help me, it could help our students, and actually has led to over a dozen conference presentations from that relationship. So what happened is I have ANT 201. We have Katie, who's got to teach the class this year and go out and got to see really that relationship in progress, is that we do really an applied class. We take students out. They get to go out and excavate. They can talk to real archaeologists. They can see what it feels like and whether they really want to get dirty or not. And they get to see it all the way through the quarter in terms of analysis and things like that. And so almost every year, the anthropologists who teach archaeology have done a project with the Wallowa-Whitman National Forest. Oftentimes, it falls in line with research that they're doing. It's a project that they're doing research on, and it fills a lot of needs. And what I found, too, is that for our students, is they can see what it's really like. We're not like Indiana Jones. We're not always finding really cool gold stuff everywhere, although, you know, I think we find some pretty cool stuff here locally. It's some of the biggest gold mines in the nation. We're within our region. And so what I have up here is that Camp Carson It's one of the research projects that are still ongoing. We've been doing research there for over a decade. And what happened is that it's a project that about 30 years ago, one of our anthropology professors had done some work out there with the forest, but it had laid essentially fallow up there, and the entire site had grown over. And one day, the archaeologists with the Wallowa National Forest said, let's go for a hike. We found the location, and they were able to get national funding to do clearing so that we could do research up there at Camp Carson. And it's, for locals, it's especially valuable to them. They consider it precious, and they watch out for it. And we have multiple generations of families here that had family members that were miners at Camp Carson. Ironically, the finding of gold ties directly in with the founding of La Grande, Oregon in 1862. And there's no coincidence there at all. But what happened is that there's lots of research. It's 20 square miles. It's an endless amount of research that we can do. And it's inexpensive, but it's led to publications, and both peer-reviewed as well as federal level publications that have brought to the attention of folks in Washington, D.C., the kind of research EOU is doing with the forest, which is pretty valuable. And also, this research was tied in with the first memorandum of understanding that EOU had with the forest. It was to do archaeological and other research, and then it's led to a second MOU, which is important for our university. The other thing, too, I put up Patrick Project. It's actually a project that's going on right now. I'm pretty excited about it. Through this relationship, we've had a number of projects that the forest has provided funding to EOU to go take students out and do research. And we're currently recording 300 to 400 miles of narrow gauge railroad within the Patrick Project west of Baker City. And so I have 5 students going out this quarter. We're going out and surveying. They get to learn how to use all the equipment, how to record, and most of them want to go on to be archaeologists, so I'm excited about that. And what they end up doing is a project that not just benefits me, but also benefits them. They can put it on a resume, and hopefully, as they move on, can successfully get into graduate school with that kind of research. The other thing is community outreach. One thing is, in terms of a teaching university, is that we're reliant on our regional partners, including the families that live here locally. I've done a number of presentations throughout our valley and in neighboring cities about the kind of archaeological research we do. It's led to actually a cascading effect of research projects of students going out and doing ethnographic interviews with locals, including having relationships in Baker City with their historical museum that hopefully we're going to have students being involved in a local research project there. So it's a win-win. And what happens is that for these kinds of projects, I focus on going to the national conference. It's a juried conference. Not everyone gets to go. Although I'm going to have to admit, and Gary hinted at it, is if you go enough times, they recognize your name, and pretty much every time you put your paper in, they're going to pick you. But in your early years, it doesn't happen, so you have to keep trying over and over. But once you establish a name at the conference, they'll keep having you come. What is also important about going to the national conferences is not just presenting, it's networking. And for those of you that are focusing on tenure and promotion, that's one of the more valuable parts of going to a conference, is not just going and presenting, but meeting with other colleagues or senior faculty and things like that. And I'm going to bring that up again about another research project that we've been working on. The other thing is, at least in terms of applied research, I've been incredibly fortunate to have long-term relationships with tribes in the Northwest. I had mentioned I worked for the Burns Paiute tribe. It was for 7.5 years. I ran their cultural program before I came back to teaching. I can't tell you exactly what kind of research I did because it's confidential, but over the years, they have brought me back to do research with them and to do archaeological surveys. This is a project from a few years ago, and well, actually probably 4 years ago. I was finishing up being an associate dean, and I got a call from their head of the cultural program going, we need somebody to teach people how to do ethnographies and how to do research. I just don't have the time. Can you come? We'll pay you, kind of thing. And it was in the summer. And I talked to the dean and other folks, and they said, go on your merry way and do it. And what turned out to be is that I was able to actually convince the tribe to let one of our EOU students to go do the research with me. It led to about 10 trips back and forth. And we were interviewing tribal members, mostly elders, about a specific area that was incredibly important to them. A traditional and cultural property is an area of cultural significance for an ethnic group. It isn't just a tribe, it could be any ethnicity. And what the Burns Paiute, like many of the other tribes, are starting to record these areas that are often on federal and state land so that they won't be damaged at some point. And that's really part of the applied part of being an archaeologist, is going out and preserving those areas. And so we went out there, and the student that went along with me had been in a number of my classes, and I felt he was a good candidate. He'd actually grown up in Crane, Oregon, about 25 minutes away. And so he knew a lot of these folks' grandkids and great-grandkids. And what ended up happening is that the tribe was able to take the document that the student and I wrote. So we wrote a professional document for the tribe that in turn was turned over to the federal agency in question that went on record and also went up to DC to protect the area from any kind of damage. And so for my field as an archaeologist, we both do academic and applied research. And this was a case where it was applied research. And what ended up happening, the student was hired to work by the tribe. And so he had such a good relationship. And so those kinds of relationships carry on. And so what happens is that I've talked about some of the regional agencies. For us, since we're a teaching university primarily, but the vast majority of us also do research, is that we have a lot of state and federal, county, city agencies that need projects done. They don't necessarily have tons of funds, but we have students who want to learn how to do the kind of research. And so throughout my whole career here, I spend a lot of summers going out and doing research with these agencies, and often including students as part of that. It could be our local city government, our local county, more often than not, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife and Oregon Department of Transportation. They all use researchers in all disciplines that are replicated at EOU. And it's easy to reach out to them, ask them if there's a project that a class can be involved in, and more often than not, they're not going to turn it down. And they like to have that happen. Private landowners in our region tend not to know how to go through the tough process of, they might get federal funding, but they have to have research done. They don't know who to contact in terms of geologists, archaeologists, biologists to do research for them. We have folks here that could do that with them and produce a report. and it's a professional report that can go on your CV, and it actually ends up being reviewed by those agencies. So it goes through multiple layers of federal agencies and folks that are peers that review that work. And I put up here watershed councils too. It is that all of our communities in this region have watershed councils that are doing research. And there's opportunities to do fish research, archaeology research. It could even be physical activity and health work that watershed councils are focusing on. And they don't necessarily know who to contact. And one of the best things that you can do is reach out to them, ask if you can stop by and talk to them, provide them, you know, the kinds of skills you have, and you'll probably get a call. So the last project I'm going to talk about is one that Dr. Puentes, Jennifer, and I worked on. And part of this is born out of my lifelong research with Native American tribes in North America. And I got a call about a year and a half ago from a planning department individual from the Kalispel tribe. And it was funny. He said, I'm going to send you this RFP. You're supposed to be one of the best ethnographers to go out and do research. Maybe you can help me find somebody. And so my first thought was I was going to try to get a tribal person to go out and do that. I ended up about a month later calling and saying, did you ever hire anybody? And he said, no, we've gotten really no one applying. And I said, do you mind if we apply? Both Jennifer and I are focused on nutrition and health too. And we were able to get approved through the university. They're not used to doing contracts. And we were able to go through that minefield and applied with the thought of having 3 of our undergraduate students, one was a junior, 2 were a senior, to do research with us. But there wasn't funding within the Kalispel project, but we were able to work with the EOU Foundation to provide funding to take our students with us. And so it turned out to be a win-win. And what happened is that like every tribe in our nation is that they're trying to document their traditional or first foods to pass it on, and they're having problems. They don't know how to go through that process. So we went in, we did a couple days visit. It was like a quick and dirty, go in, and we did the ethnographic work, and then we ended up producing a report and recommendations of how they should proceed in terms of within the tribe, how the different agencies work together within the tribe, and how they should reach out to elders and honor their knowledge. And what's happened is that for our EOU students, it was valuable. It goes on their resumes. What has also led to is that we just got done at the end of last quarter and presented at a national conference. We got permission from the Kalispel tribe to do that. And then we slightly modified, like Gary had said, you modify the kind of research you did, and we submitted it to the American Anthropological Association, and we also got picked for the national conference in November. And so I wouldn't be surprised is our next step is we're going to end up writing some kind of article about how that process worked. And so I'm going to end there. I am available to talk about ideas and contacts with agencies and things like that because besides the peer-reviewed, I've had valuable opportunities with working with local agencies that often end up hiring our EOU students. And so it's a really good process. So thank you.
By the way, this PowerPoint presentation is available. All that you need to do is to email Linda or I, and you'll have it. So you don't have to worry about, did you miss anything?
Okay.
Just
Well,
let us know.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and open up for questions, and I'll come around with the microphone just so the folks online can hear what you're saying.
Thank you. Great presentation. I'm really impressed with the variety of your interests, but even more importantly, how you followed your interests. But
Yeah.
you showed that kind of intellectual curiosity that you applied to whatever came your way. And it's something I wasn't able to teach in 121, but I told them was the key to success in college, intellectual curiosity. There's one pathway that you didn't mention that I found valuable for myself, was a professional listserv that I joined, and that led to 2 major publications in books, book chapters. And at the time, it was just work I was doing, and so my dissertation was Henry James, but this was composition and applied grammar teaching.
Yeah.
So it wound up, there was a group working on outcomes assessment, which I knew something about, and so I worked on that in terms of the WPA's statement on outcomes for first-year composition, which became a standard across the nation, and worked on that. And then they published a book and wrote the chapter on that. I wrote that chapter. And then another one was just based on my work here, which, this was a long time ago, so it was fairly new, asynchronous teaching online. And so I wrote that part because you often get requests on these listservs about editors. We're looking for something to do this, and you send in something. All right, this is what I'd like to talk about, and if you're fortunate, they pick it. And that wound up in a book of strategies for teaching first-year composition, published by NCTE. That's a standard text for first-year composition.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that,
graduate school.
because actually I think all my book chapters happen through listservs. Is that I saw the listserv and sent in an abstract, and it went on from there, so I'm glad. And actually, both our national conference presentations about the Kalispell research came from seeing a listserv and saying, we were trying to organize this, anybody fit in? And I sent it off for the panel. Yeah, so it worked out really well.
Now, there's many opportunities. I'm working on a research project now that many of my colleagues and I talk about. Is there any correlation between time spent on Canvas, or LMS, and grades? So through the Summer Technology Institute, I started doing a little work on that, and it's now developed into the potential for an article. So there's things that you do every day. Kyle Pfaffenbach and the students are constantly working on posters. If you come into our building first floor, you cannot miss posters, but it's not just a one-time event. You're doing that all year round, and there's this type of thing that is right in front of us, hidden in plain sight, research that can be done that starts building your portfolio and starts building a reputation. That's what I liked about Linda's work when you saw the applied research. She took what was available and developed it into something special and starts gaining a reputation. So there's all different approaches to getting research and scholarship, publications, presentations done.
Yep.
Do we have any questions from our online audience? Okay.
So, thanks for the interesting presentation. The one thing that I really kind of appreciate how you guys have, what you've been able to accomplish in terms of involving students in using applied research, but also bridging that to the publication and finding outlets for that. And that's something that has sort of eluded me to a certain extent since I've been here. My training was really based on, it was all publish or perish, and it was all research based. There was no teaching component to it. And that took a lot of money. And there's less research dollars here, and there's less grant opportunities for undergraduate research, and there's not really highly skilled, low-paid master's and PhD students here to drive your research agenda and come up with new ideas so you can have the time to write grants. And it's just it's still something that I'm trying to learn how to navigate. And I guess, I don't know if I'm jealous that or I'm just not looking in the right places in terms of my field, maybe not having as many outlets that are amicable to this type of research, even though I think these small-scale studies that we're doing, I think they have a place. Like, I think they can contribute to the total body of knowledge, but I've had a lot of sort of just like frank, either we're not even going to review this, or just turn down, because the level of science being conducted for, you know, health and wellness and sports performance and these types of things are, I don't know, it's just interesting. And even if you do, it's very common. Now, I understand the predatory journal part of it, but it's very common in our field for there to be page fees. That's not something that's like a new strange thing. I mean, it's $500 to $1,000 a page, and then you can have additional fees for figures, and it's even beyond that if you want them in color and these types of things, right? And so, yeah, do you have any advice in terms of finding these sort of niches for this style of work that isn't maybe, I don't know. I mean, that's something that since I've been here has eluded me. We've produced, there's a lot of knowledge sitting in filing cabinets and those posters. It just has been, I've had a difficult time finding places to just disseminate it.
Yeah, I can answer partly that, is that for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, for the Forest Service, and BLM, they have national programs to get kids out into the forest, and they have funding. So I'd recommend reaching out to them. For the Wallowa-Whitman National Forest, we have an MOU for all of us as faculty to do research with them. And so I would talk to them. And I know that, and why it's important to them is they get points that then go up to Washington, D.C. for doing that kind of work. They get points for doing it, and then it brings more funding back to them. And so I think that's one outlet for you. The other thing is that for when we got the NIH and Northwest Health Foundation, and we're doing similar research, so it's sort of what you do, because I'm a nutritional anthropologist first before an archaeologist, is that we were doing local research with some of the areas, and then built that relationship, and we're able to get to build on that. And so what happened is we had other funders from the county and city and all that helped support it. So I would think one way to go about that is to contact the local and regional superintendents of school systems and say, we have students that can help do that research. I can do research. This is my skill set. Is there a way to carve out some funding for us to do that with you? And so we started sort of small and worked up towards it, and I think that's one way to do it. There's also, there's a publication that comes out every year of nonprofit foundations, and I can't think of I can't think of the name right up. I can send it to you, the idea. We'll both think about it and send it. You can go in there, and they're ones that focused on your field. And you can go in and look at the kind of research projects, and what they're usually looking is for partners, and it's easy for us to find partners to do research, but they like the idea of including college students in on those kinds of projects for doing research. And so I know when I worked for the Burns Paiute tribe, I spent a lot of time. I was soft funded totally when I was there for 7.5 years, so I funded upwards of 23 people, and part of it is through our local nonprofits and national ones. But we have some really big ones that are along the I-5 corridor that are really interested in the kind of work you're doing. And so it's a really good place to start.
Kyle, I would use a athletic analogy here, and that is, if I was at your stage in your career, win the conference first, get tenure. So getting tenure means there's certain requirements, and I think you're pretty close to it. Once you get tenure, you then have opportunities to start looking at some of the suggestions that Linda gave, but she also threw a nugget out to the entire group. Go to a conference and start talking with people, because I connected with someone at Stanford because of the dissertation that I wrote. In fact, I asked for his help. I was working really on a local application of what he did. Well, that led to a number of things. If you go to conferences and you start talking and asking the people that are in, let's say, the Tier 1 institutions, what are you doing? How do you go about doing that? Do you have any ideas? You'll be surprised at how helpful they are. And don't underestimate the value of the publications or the research that you have. You're limited here. All of us are. We just don't have teaching assistants and huge research dollars. But if you can maximize what you have, take a look at some of the open access journals. And are they going to be Tier 1? No, but you're not working on that yet. But let's fast forward your career 10 years from now, and you're interviewing at a Tier 1 school. Well, look, within the limitations that I had, you'll have a Linda-like CV where you've got 50 publications. I was at all of these conferences, and then we did these types of things, because I know how motivated you are. And as you go along, you then find out other opportunities that are there. That's how I found out about all of these. Colleagues were telling me that, and I spent my time, sometimes Saturdays and Sundays, looking through various publications and web sources. If anyone's going to work hard, it's going to be you, so those would be some directions to take. But don't underestimate the value of what you're doing. Don't underestimate that. And anyone. Don't underestimate.
Add one more thing on to yours, is that we found we were chosen for the Kalispell research, and there were actually other people that applied the RFP eventually. We were the only one that had undergrad students, and they picked us. All the rest had grad students. And I can tell you, our 3 undergrads performed as well as any grad student. I mean, it was tough. They were interviewing people by themselves.
So those hurdles, I feel like I've been overcome.
Yeah.
It's been more finding appropriate places to disseminate the
Right.
small-scale undergrad student-driven research that we've come produced.
Right.
A lot of the, even mid-level journals in our field, they're expecting multiple experiments that took place in different groups over a multiple time period. That is more like, so if I have one student that does a capstone project and it's just one really good experiment, and there may be only 2 figures associated with that experiment, and it's just, well, this isn't appropriate for our journal, find something else to do with that.
Yeah.
Right? Or write an abstract for a meeting somewhere or something like that. And I guess what I was appreciating about you guys have found creative ways to disseminate
Yeah.
these types of things. I mean, we have collaborations with the Grand Valley Tellers and different people, we have some irons in the fire in terms of those types of things. So that hurdle, I feel like I do play with. It's more the finding ways and finding the time
Yeah.
to generate the papers and disseminate that information in like respected how to.
Right.
That's been a challenge. I mean, that's been a challenge. Like my Google Scholar was fine when I got here. It's been a challenge to add to that in that sort of way.
First, win the conference,
It's good.
because then you've bought time and you've got more credibility. And Linda, I think, and I started our careers differently than you did. I mean, you're young and you're in the academy. I know I came to the academy late in my life, career life, so to speak.
Yeah, I don't know. I started in my 30s, so.
Okay, right. I started a little bit later than that.
Yeah.
And so we've had a little bit different background coming at it and so forth.
I think the perspective is really cool. So I think it's being in a place like this, maybe that was advantageous in some ways because you have this creative
Yes.
thinking about disseminating.
Yeah.
work,
Yes.
As opposed to this is what academic work is, and
And that,
it's not cutting anything.
new people that are going to be starting, if you do that, you don't let those restraints govern you. Maybe this is the career direction, that you may not want to go to UCLA. You may not want that for you or your family. And this may be home, or the next step may be your home, or we don't know. So if you're comfortable with that, I mean, look how comfortable Linda is doing these projects, and she's
Yeah.
going off to various conferences, and she's noted now. This is her home.
So building off their comments about creativity, what it kind of sounds like to me that you have is actually a great piece thinking about how to teach topics in your field, how to engage students in research. So I start looking in your discipline for those teaching journals and what type of work they're doing. You can spend time building up how you scaffold all the skills into what they're doing and what they come up with. So it's less about their particular findings and more about how this has created an opportunity, and you can assess their ability to move on and continue this at a bigger perspective.
Some of my titles now will have XYZ at a rural university or in a rural setting. That's who we are, and why not use that?
Yeah.
We have about 2 minutes left. Does that give you, Donald, your, sorry, I took the mic
hope
back
so.
from you.
My comment's similar to yours. So undergraduate research is a hot topic in education, and with AAC&U, it's a high-impact practice. So they'd be happy to see, and it's a national publication, happy to see an article on it, especially with the breadth in your program involving undergraduates in research. And then the other place, so has Kelly published anything on her work with, I forget the exact title. Yeah.
I know they've presented.
Yes.
I'm not sure about.
So I'm thinking education journal. So you reach outside your field.
This is outside of my understanding of how this works. These are really good ideas because, like, yeah, we have a clear track record of these projects being a really important component of why we're sending so many students to graduate school.
Yeah.
But I never considered writing about the process of getting the students into graduate
Yeah.
school. I've only thought about the results themselves in terms of what we're
Yeah.
Well, he's smiling now, Linda. He's smiling. Before it was, I'm happy to see that.
And you can also present on that on the food research that it's still ongoing. I presented on that process and how to teach that at a university and the kind of process of how students learn those skill sets and things like that. And so I think if you just don't focus on the data, but think about the kinds of incredible things we do at EOU to support our students, people want to hear them at conferences too. Yeah.
And, pardon me, Linda, how many posters have you and your students put up over the years that you've been here? I'll bet it's about 50. I'll bet there's 50.
I do keep track of is I've directly worked with 28 students in 4 years they've gotten to graduate school.
If
Yeah.
you, Kyle, if you
pretty
roll all of that together, you've got something that's very important right in your hands.
Somebody will watch.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In other words, how did you do that? How do you do that? I mean, look how Linda is helping her students get their start in their careers. How did she do that? It's almost proprietary.
Yeah.
That's what's cool about it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone. It is 5 o'clock, and I want to make sure people can get on to their next destination. So thank you so much for coming
Thank
this
you.
afternoon. And
Yes.
maybe our speakers have a few minutes if people have individual comments or questions they need to go up afterwards. Thanks.
Thank you for coming.